Hi, and welcome to another edition of Plymouth Culture's conversations that John and I have been conducting. Apologies, John and I had a tiny technical hitch on this one, so you launch straight into the conversation with Middleton cooperating. Don't miss much, um, and I think the conversation is so worthwhile and so inspiring. Hope you enjoy.
It wasn't clear when we started what we were creating. And we realized during the course of those co-design meetings that what we were actually creating was an organization which was to be a catalyst. Or the analogy I used was the blue touch paper. There were going to be fireworks in Middleton, and we wanted those fireworks. But the organization we were creating wasn't going to be the firework. Because it needed to focus on enabling and catalyzing and encouraging, facilitating. So we came to the conclusion it would be a relatively small organization that would hold together the community, the business, the private and public sector, hold these things together, but could not be dominated by any of them. It couldn't be dominated by the council or by the co-op movement, which is strong in Manchester, or the local community. You know, its strength needed to be in its kind of neutrality in relation to each of those parts of the community. Because if it could establish that, then it could be trusted by all of them. It wouldn't be looked on suspiciously as, well, that's the vehicle of the council or the noisy local community or whatever. And so it was to be the catalyst and to focus on having, well, the plan was to have an office, to have a website, to start to build up a core of information, to be the go-to place if anybody in Middleton wanted to do anything new. So that Middleton cooperating, we called it, we went for the verb rather than the noun, action rather than concept, and well, there were other reasons as well. It was, and we registered it as what's called a community benefit society, which is the other type of legal entity under the Cooperative and Community Benefit Society legislation, so that it could have representation from all these different parts of the community and the economy. And it was set up with the specific purpose of making Middleton a better place to live and work, with a series of foundational commitments to things like respecting people, fair living, fair wages, fair payment for things, treating the climate emergency as an emergency, a whole series of things that were really important to those who were part of the foundation of it. We had a really strong core team of people, including Mark Callum, the councillor at the time, who also was passionate about the music business. He wanted to set up a cooperative music venue. That was his passion. And then there was a lady from Action Together, which was a kind of charity infrastructure organisation to support the development of Action Together in North Manchester. An academic from Manchester University who was involved with the Community Bank project. And then during the course of the meetings, we were joined by a lady who had just started to work for Rochdale Council as an officer and subsequently became the person responsible for developing their community wealth building plan.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I can see it's a mixture of organizations and individuals, if you like,
yes,
to pull together, because obviously if there's a lot of things going on in the community already, you have to build on what's there rather than duplicating it and putting people's noses out of joint.
Exactly. We didn't want to replace anything. We wanted to fill a gap, really, which was to have a place that anybody from the community or the local business community could go to and say, I've got this idea. And Middleton cooperating would be able to say, well, we've got the contacts at the council or in health or the housing body. We know where there are institutional interests in this kind of thing, and potentially some people support, some bureaucratic support or financial support. And so, yes, it was a combination of a group of people led by Mark who were passionate about wanting to do something good for Middleton, and the organizations they could pull into that. And just to broaden it out to back to your question, the bigger picture. So Middleton was very place-based, and in local government language, it's a place-based development body. The idea is that Middleton would be the go-to place if you wanted to do something in Middleton. But if you were looking to do something on a bigger scale, or outside perhaps the remit of what Middleton could cope with locally, Innovation Co-op would be a place that could also host new ideas and host new projects in the way that Middleton might host an initial startup. It might lend its Zoom account, it might help with a funding bid, it might lend its bank account to do what's called fiscal hosting, but to host an organization locally. The Innovation Co-op wants to be able to host startups. It wants to provide fiscal hosting so that people can use its bank account. It wants to provide employee hosting if a startup didn't have the infrastructure to employ somebody. And asset hosting if an organization wanted to lease something or take a transfer of an asset but didn't have a legal entity yet.
So sorry, just to interrupt again, but how to create a base that can be used by other organizations that are integrated with what you're doing to grow. Maybe that's a sidetrack, but I'd be quite interested to know a little bit more about that.
Yes, well, in terms of the hosting that Middleton is doing, kind of happens already. The NHS and local government, they host. You get a group of councils that work together on a project, and they might host an employee that's dedicated to it, and they don't make a fuss about it, they just do it.
Yeah.
And the concept of fiscal hosting, which emerged from the tech sector, the idea of borrowing a bank account, has been developed and is up and running. And so the things that Middleton is doing and wants to do are already there and developed and are not that unfamiliar. What we're seeking to do with the Innovation Co-op, which is a kind of more ambitious, it's the kind of taking it to the next stage, is a big project. Yes, there's a lot of legal work to do to underpin it, but it's just taking to the next level what Middleton is doing locally, because the inhibition in a lot of enterprise is the bureaucracy. It's setting up a legal structure. You need to have a business plan. You need to have thought things through. And if you need to register, then you need to have a bank account, and you've got to go through a whole load of procedures, which quite often people may not be ready for or have the skills and capacity to do.
Yeah.
And they may never need to do it, because the idea may not actually emerge as it was intended, because it might be taken over by an existing organization who can say, well, we can do that.
Yeah.
So what we don't have is that flexibility for startups that can get going without having to do the legal structure stuff. And that's what we've, I suppose the bigger picture point is that most people see business development through the Silicon Valley model, the Dragon's Den. That's how you do business development. Well, actually, there are loads of businesses that don't do that start off with Mark and Callum in a pub having a very good idea, and but they don't have the support and backup. And a lot of what's happening in cooperative development, it's all about having the support and backup, and we need to improve how we do it. And there have been lots of different experiments. Well, how do you provide that support? Well, you can have 4 hours from here, or half a day from that person. That's not what these organizations need. They need a host. They need somebody who puts an arm around them and says, well, we're part of a collaborative economy here. We're networked into this local community. If that's what you want to do, we want you to come and use our facilities so that we can nurture you and help you. And if you want to spin out at some point, that's fine, because we don't want to become a social housing provider or a childcare provider. But we want there to be social housing and childcare in Middleton.
Yeah, we want there to be social housing and cooperative childcare. We want those to be the predominant models, really. We do want to take control. We're very ambitious, and it is about ownership. And I mean, what you're saying there, Cliff, about bureaucracy and organisational stuff, we do make a big effort to come at it from the other angle. We're very people focused, and one of our principles is that every interaction, whether that's a business interaction or whatever, it is a personal interaction, and we do try and stay faithful to that. And we start our developments talking to people and identifying issues with them. So there is an element of what we do which is about cooperative development, but it's coming out of where people are, what their issues are, and by connecting up individuals, residents, small businesses, anchor organisations, partner cooperatives, we will build these circles which develop their own work plans and their work streams and bring about change in that way.
So I've got 2 or 3 questions. One is how you promote yourselves in the community. How do people know about you and know what you provide? Secondly, I understand what you're saying. You're there for people to come to you, but there must be, if you have a lot of demand, is there some structure that allows you to prioritize what you're doing with your energies? And the third and sort of related question is, who's doing it? Sorry, a whole bunch of questions there.
Yeah, well, we're quite a new organisation. We were only registered with the FCA on the 13th of April 2021. So we're just coming up to our second birthday. Cliff described the structure. We've got 6 directors and we've got 4 expert advisors. All those 10 people are very busy people doing other things. So the things that get done for and with Middleton Cooperating are on top of a lot of other things for those people. So we've really struggled with capacity, which meant that from the start we were looking for funding from various grant-making bodies so that we could employ somebody. And very early on, we got into a really good conversation with the National Lottery, Growing Great Ideas Fund, and we put together a bid that was for nearly 1.4 million that would have funded 5 members of staff over 5 years. And that would have been a manager, a community engagement specialist, a cooperative development specialist, and a kind of impact measurement specialist as well, and an administrator organizer, office costs, etc. And the Growing Great Ideas Fund loved it, took us down through the whole of 2021, down this beautiful conversation about how it was all going to happen, and then last minute, last January, that just fell at the last hurdle, and that was a big blow. So we thought we were getting the capacity to do the kind of things that we want to do at some pace, and I think it would have been amazing to have got that as such a young organisation, but it was on the cards. So then most of last year it's been about trying to find funding. We've just been given a grant of 100,000 from Lankelly Chase. They approached us, so they heard about what we wanted to do, liked the sound of it, came to us and said, we'll give you the money to get this off the ground. So we are using that to employ a development manager for the next 18 months. And they start work on the 16th of May. And that will be our first bit of paid capacity. So it'll be their role over the next 18 months to build on the work that we've already done so far. So in terms of publicity, and we've got a Twitter account, it's got about 350 followers. We've built a website, but most of the informing people and building things has been face-to-face, one-to-one conversations. And we started our work really just as the pandemic hit. So it was fortunate that suddenly Zoom exists and we can have all these conversations. And
Yeah.
Things happen slowly, John.
Sure.
That it feels like, I think we've done things fast, but things aren't, as you say, now how we want them to be. And the kind of change we want to bring about is transformational and will take a long time. We recognise we're in a long-term project and we can't rush. We work with some urgency and take opportunities as they arise. But yeah, we recognise the scale and the ambition of what we're doing, and we're proud of the ambition as well.
I think another point to add to that, John, is that my experience doing cooperative development is that the analogy I use is it's surfing. You need to be out there on your board paddling away, looking for the waves. You can't make the waves as a cooperative development person, but if you can see one soon enough and get yourself in the right position, you might be able to surf it. And that's really important in cooperative development, because there's a danger that councils think, well, we can create co-ops. Well, they can't. What they can do is create the right environment.
I like the surfing analogy. I think that's absolutely right. You can't kind of railroad things through. You've got to kind of work with what's there. Just tell us a little bit more about how that works regionally, or where you would like it to get to regionally, if I can put it like that.
Interesting question. Well, my colleagues within the Innovation Co-op come from the tech sector, and they see Innovation Co-op as global, not regional.
Okay.
For them, if you're in the tech business, it doesn't matter where you are on the planet. And they want Innovation Co-op to facilitate whatever comes along. That's kind of an ongoing discussion. But in a sense, what it needs, people are probably familiar with the kind of cooperative idea that you have primary organizations and secondary organizations. You have the primary, which is the customer facing ones, like the individual co-op shops, which eventually got together and created a wholesaler so that they could buy collectively, and the primaries owned the secondary, and the secondary only existed to serve the primaries. And that kind of inverted model, the inverted triangle model, if you like, because they're all controlled by the members of the primaries, is a kind of typical cooperative structure. And we see the emergence of organizations like Middleton Cooperating and other development bodies, whether they be cooperative or not, but community development bodies, as being the potential primaries for the Innovation Co-op, which is a secondary, which is specifically there to do more difficult and complicated things, which the primaries aren't set up to do, but they need. And so I think we see it emerging both sectorally. So we've talked about it being place-based, but we set up one organization which hasn't quite really got up and running yet, which is a BAME social enterprise network. And that's not quite so place-based. It's based around BAME social entrepreneurs who are very ambitious, and the funders of BAME social enterprise say it's much better if those BAME communities actually determine where the money goes, rather than late middle-aged white men in London. And so the funders are part of this, and they are working to enable this new organization to allocate the funding when a new funding stream comes on board. And so that's very sector driven. And we see a whole range of kind of contexts in which a development body might emerge. It might be regional, it might be local, it might be sectoral, and I think we're kind of, this is evolutionary, and we're open at the work I'm doing at the moment. Talking of the rural context, we're setting up a cooperative with farmers, with the local water company, the organisations involved in the river. This is all around the River Ribble, which is to pull together a whole range of different interests around flood defence and addressing river contamination, and farmers changing from EU subsidies to ecosystem services.
I asked Mark at the beginning about your relationship with the council, and see if things really begin to move, then having a good relationship with the council does seem to me important. I mean, this phrase community wealth building, which is being used so much in local authorities now, and as you said, I mean, what does it mean? It means a lot of different things to different people. So I absolutely understand that your relationship with the council, and any organization trying to do something new is going to have complicated relationships with the council. But I just wondered how important you see that as you go forward. And then finally, what I'd like to ask you is where you would like to get to in say 5 or 10 years time. I mean, this is about inspiring change at a community level, not just the level of individual organizations. So how your vision for the future, and how you see that shaping out, and how you think the relationship with the council, or whether it's at the Middleton level or at the regional level, Greater Manchester, how that's going to impact on what you do, how you manage those relationships.
Yeah, for Middleton, I think the relationship with the council is crucial. I don't think we can achieve much without their support, and they could definitely make things very difficult for us and impossible for us to achieve anything if we ended up in some kind of opposition. I think the council are understandably cautious about us as an organisation, because we are setting up a decision-making structure. We want to get into an impact on areas that are council's responsibility. We want to do that from a partnership perspective, from our point of view, and we need the council to facilitate activity with us and alongside us.
John, if I could just add a couple of thoughts here, that we're doing an interesting piece for the Cooperative Council's Innovation Network, a piece of work, a policy lab called Tackling Barriers to Developing a Cooperative Economy. And from this have emerged some, in a sense, pretty obvious points that can get in the way, that within a council, you will have people who are fully supportive of a cooperative approach to community and business development, and a more traditional, at the other end of the spectrum, a much more traditional business approach, who may be cynical or worse, or hostile. And a council, it's the people within the council that you're dealing with day in, day out, whether they're councillors or officers. And it's managing, it's recognizing that if you're dealing with people who are already on side, that's fine. If you're dealing with people who really don't get this or don't really agree that it's a good idea, we need a set of arguments and clear, kind of intellectually sound material that we can go to them and say, this isn't a harebrained idea, it's got heritage, it's got some legal. And then also the council itself needs to decide, if it's declared itself to be a cooperative council, that's helpful, but it's got to be able to reconcile within itself a traditional, what they might regard as regeneration, which is shiny new buildings, to caricature it, with the economic development, which is very different. And so there is that tension within councils, and recognize.
And within that, the idea of ownership is central. Whether it's residential care for older adults, whether it's in childcare facilities, whether it's in local housing, local energy, owned by us, producing renewable energy. So in transport, in advice, in co-working space, in cultural activities, in banking, that we're making progress towards local ownership and local control and the different economic model, I suppose, in each of those areas, which in itself builds a stronger community and much more working together.